discussion slide. Oh,
there we go.
Just toggled. Yeah.
Yeah, it just toggled. All right. You are up, Jason.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So now transitioning from hard drives over to SSDs again, I want to talk about E1.S and why we think it's the IOPS density leader. We've certainly had many conversations in the work group on EDSF form factors and what's next. But before we dive into E1.S and why we're really excited about it, let's actually talk about how we got here to begin with. The first mainstream flash platform was U.2. It really took the hard drive form factor, changed out the connector, but allowed flash to be deployed in storage systems with simple change out of backplanes. And then there are connectors that allow you to do both. But as we've gone into the flash ecosystem, we realized hard drive form factors are a bit limiting. So we had M.2s come up, and they brought in high density, but they brought in their fair share of problems, thermal issues and serviceability issues. And then we had the opportunity to really go after density and think what would be unique. So we ended up coming up with these E1.L devices, what we call the ruler. And those are fantastic for density. The problem was we didn't really have a performant flash system that allowed smaller capacities that offered all the same advantages of E1.L in a smaller form factor. So that's where E1.S got a hold. And E1.S started with many different form factors. There are 4 that were listed in the specification. But as from Microsoft's perspective, as we started to go through it, we realized that the 9.5 was a bit limiting on thermal and performance, and the 25 was simply not dense enough for our needs. So via OCP, we kicked off that exploration in October of last year, I believe, where we had the face-to-face. Multiple companies shared their thermal data and their reasonings on different trade-offs on thicknesses versus power. And Microsoft, for our part, we shared our graph that you see on the bottom left, and we showed density versus power consumption and performance. And we found the sweet spot was somewhere in that 14 to 15 millimeter area. But we opened that up to the wider community. I think as we discussed this as a team, the 15 millimeter ended up being the right compromise of performance and density. And ultimately, we had a lot of projections and proposals on how to get there for 15 millimeters. And now we actually have that from many vendors. But the key is density matters, which is why this 15 is really enabling us to do some really neat designs. In the past, we would take 2 U.2 devices and put them in the front of a server as an example. But when you do that, you're blocking the airflow going in. And now in my hands, I'm holding 4 E1.S devices that take up the same amount of space as those 2 U.2s. And what that allows us to do is get double the amount of IOPS in the same amount of space as 2 U.2s, and we're actually enabling better airflow to components that are downstream of that. So it's really great to see the OCP community and the EDSFF community come together and add this 15 millimeter design option in there. We think that allows a really good balance of optimized designs where you can have the right amount of performance and the right amount of density to actually get something out the door. So for Microsoft, we're going to leverage E1.S 15 millimeter for multiple platforms. It's a really good fit for our storage platforms. It's a great fit for our compute platforms. And I'm sure we'll find even more use cases in the future because it seems to be just the right size. And the studies that we did, last year and early this year, now that we have real working samples, they're in our systems, they've actually delivered on the promise of that low airflow and less impedance to the downstream devices. So it's worked out really well for us, and we're excited to start leveraging that and eventually contribute some of those platforms out to the community. And the 15 millimeter, it enables us to do more flexible designs. By removing M.2s, we no longer have to go into the system to service an SSD. When an SSD fails, we can now go to the front bezel, remove it, and continue on. We also had those issues on the M.2s where we had to limit the performance. We simply couldn't keep them cool. And so some of the ideas were, let's put heat sinks on it. So many of our platforms have add-in cards with heat sinks to keep the M.2s cool, or on the motherboard with high airflow to keep them cool, but we don't have to make that compromise with the E1.S 15 millimeter. We can run the SSDs at full speed now. We don't have to worry about that. I already mentioned enable the hot plug, but what's even more exciting is seeing how quickly this form factor is taking off. Later on today, you'll see a bunch of different system designs, whether they're close to production or in concept, but there's a lot of opportunity to leverage this. We already have many, if not all, major SSD vendors in-house and testing right now with E1.S, many of which are already 15 millimeter. And we fully expect that the ecosystem next year will transition, that everybody will be offering E1.S. So what's next? Where do we go from here? Now we really are looking for the broader community to start thinking about how they can leverage this form factor. What can they do in PCI Express Gen 5? Now you have some better thermal capabilities with the 15 and 25 millimeter. What else can go in this form factor? Things like accelerators. We talk about computational storage. This seems to be a great platform to leverage. We're really hoping that we're going to see a lot more people transition off of M.2 as they see the ability of E1.S to displace that. M.2s may still linger for boot devices because they are really compact, but there are variants of E1.S that are thin that should allow replacement there as well, allowing you to validate one controller design and deploy it in many different systems. So our call to action, we really want to see the broader community start contributing things like system designs, latch designs, module designs. Share how you're using it and help influence others on how you used it. We previously in the slide deck showed an image. We were going to show that platform actually at the OCP Summit in the spring. But I think in the following talks you're going to see this afternoon, you'll see some other ideas, how others have used the systems. They'll talk about when and how they're going to contribute either the platforms or pieces of the platforms, some of the latches. But we really encourage everyone to get involved and help us drive things like this. A perfect example of how the open compute community can work with the industry standards and actually drive innovation. With that, I have a few minutes for questions. If there are any questions about how we're using it, what benefits we've seen, or anything else. So we'll first go if there's anybody on the Zoom call that has questions, and if not, if someone has the ability to read any of the questions from the FN Virtual app.
So this is Mike Peterson from Netflix. One of the things that we have a hard time with, because we have a very small lab, is doing testing because we don't have like a made backplane. Is there any, is there anything that has been created by anyone that we could use to do like basic testing around these appliances before creating backplanes for them?
Is your question on maybe an adapter cable from PCI M slot into? I don't know if I've seen those available, but that's a great idea. We could certainly reach out to some of our friends.
There are some E1.S prototype platforms, but they only support PCI Gen 3 speed data rates. I can copy the link on the chat window. You can buy them off the shelf for your testing purposes.
Yeah, if you could put that in the document for this session, there's that shared document thing. If you could just put
the Etherpad at the bottom. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be awesome because, one of the things we want to do is do a bunch of testing so that we can demonstrate that it has significant value, and then it's easier for us to invest in a, backplane, which is, for our scale is going to be a not insignificant investment.
And Mike, that's actually an excellent point. So you're going to see a system later on this afternoon that should be commercially available soon. That may be a good platform to leverage. You see some other ideas in an open platform that are going to be contributed to OCP. So hopefully those might also be of interest. If they're cable adapters, I certainly think that's probably easier. You can put them in any system that you currently have. That's a great idea, and I think that's something we should try to get either productized or contributed into Open Compute.
Yeah, and it would just be nice to be able to do some bench-based testing as well for controllers and stuff. So that's perfect. Thank you very much.
So Jason, there's one question that came in on the chat. When do we see U.2 be replaced by EDSFF E1.S? That's
a great question. So U.2 currently bridges the gap between the EDSF short and the long. So it has a blend of capacity and it certainly offers a lot of performance. I think what you're going to see in the market is that U.2 is going to live for another generation or two, but you'll see some of that market go to E1.S, where you're looking for very high performance, very compact form factors. I think you'll see the rise of E3, which will have a slim and a wide version. And I believe you'll see some of the traditional U.2 use cases where you need that medium blend of capacity and performance moving to E3. And I think you'll see further movement on if you simply need a ton of flash at the lowest cost, you'll see E1.Ls. And so I'm holding up one here. I don't know if it's visible for others not in the Zoom call, but this thing is giant. And I don't think that's consumable by a lot of companies because your unit of deployment today is 16 terabyte moving to 32 and above. So I think what you're going to see is E1.S and E3 sort of sharing the market of lower capacity, high performance devices.
One other question, Pecan, you're on the Zoom call. So if you want to unmute and ask your question, might be better than me repeating it.
Sure. Thank you, Archana. Hi, Jason. My question is E1.S comes with or can support two types of connectors, 2C and 1C. And usually we have seen that the 1C is more prevalent in the early devices which have come up from the SSD form factor. But do you see the 2C becoming popular because it can support higher IOPS going forward?
That's an excellent question. For the Microsoft use case, we certainly like the 1C. And as we've worked with many controller and SSD providers, we think 1C enables everything we're looking for. But I think what you might be getting at is this isn't a form factor just for SSDs. There are other use cases that might need some of the higher bandwidth. So I think the 2C connector would enable some of those other use cases that we might not be leveraging currently. But if you look at, today we're at PCI Express Gen 4 on most of these E1.S modules. But as you move to Gen 5, that by 4 gives you an incredible amount of bandwidth. So unless you're looking at things like storage class memory, I think for standard NAND devices, a 1C is probably going to be enough. That's at least my perspective.
Thank you.
Does anyone else on the Zoom call have any questions? Because I don't see any comments or questions coming in on the actual FN virtual platform. And if you do, please just unmute and ask, please.
Yeah, Jason, you mentioned there you guys, Microsoft was looking to contribute the E1.S platform and some of that into OCP. Do you have a timeline for when that may happen?
We have several platforms that are using E1.S. We need to evaluate when they'll be stable enough that we'll make some contributions. The image that I showed earlier on in this presentation was a concept we had shown or going to show physically in Open Compute this spring. But right now we've actually been changing some of those designs. We've actually found newer ways to use E1.S. So a lot of designs are in flight. And when they're ready, we'll probably contribute those to the Open Compute community, but no exact timelines right now. But that's a great question. And I think that both your presentation and a few others this afternoon are going to talk about contributions and some other platforms that are really close to becoming reality.
Okay, I do not see anything else on the FN virtual platform or here, and we are slated for a 15-minute break right now. There is a movement break / yoga. So if you've been sitting in your chair for a while and you just need to limber up for the afternoon session, please click back into the lobby, take advantage of it. It's being brought to you by Facebook, and it's actually kind of cool. If you need a coffee pick-me-up, there's also coffee available that you can click into. And we will meet back here at 2:45. Sound good?
All righty.
All right, thank you.
And for everybody's reference, I will share the agenda and leave it up during the break so people are aware. What else is coming up this afternoon?
This is perfect. Thank you so much. I was just looking for the track is on break session, PowerPoint slide, but this is perfect. Thank you.